All right, our next speaker today is Lyndsey Meadors Fennelly. She's a great friend of the Ed Thomas Family Foundation. She's helped us out speaking previously and does a great job for our leadership academies. She is a former Iowa State All-American and WNBA draftee. She has since trained over 40,000 athletes as a basketball skills trainer. She has created Campus Cycle, a beat-driven spin studio, and is a community leader in Ames, Iowa. Lindsey is a passionate advocate for mental health and a proud mom to Will, who is 6, and Callie, who is 2, as well as a wife to Iowa State women's basketball assistant coach, Billy. At this time, we'd like to welcome Lyndsey Fennelly. Thank you.
All right, well, good morning, and thank you for having me. I hear the introduction, I hear some of the accolades and the resume bullet points of the things that I've done and the things that I accomplish, and it used to really get me going, and I used to think to myself, oh man, I've done this, and I played in the WNBA, and I was an All-American at Iowa State, and I married a super hot guy named Billy, and I have these 2 beautiful kids, and I have this, and I have that, and I have this, and I have that, and I built a spin studio, and I don't know nothing about owning a brick and mortar business. And then on top of it, I've spoken to almost 8,000 people and shared with them my mental health story, and it's the chase, the chase, the chase. And I do think it's important to work hard, and I do think it's important to pursue dreams and chase goals. But at the end of the day, I hope that you just look at me as just Lindsey, as just a human being, because that's all we really are. And I think that when we come back to who we are in the baseline, it makes life a lot simpler. And I wasn't going to bring this up to start, but I am going to because it was the last thing I watched last night. Have any of you guys heard of, or maybe those of you that are watching this digitally, thinking about The Social Dilemma? Just out of curiosity, anyone heard it? Okay, seen it. If you are taking notes today, if you are watching on your camera, that's your homework assignment tonight. Or maybe not tonight, check with your parents. Don't blame it on me when you get to watch something, right? And then well, Lindsey told me I could watch it tonight. But check out The Social Dilemma. And what I'm going to talk about today is I'm going to share with you a very personal, a very real, a very raw mental health story and journey that might kind of shift the way that you look at mental illness and mental health. But what I hope you hear in this is just a human being. And I hope as you're sitting there, you think of the people that you love, the people that you care about, but mostly you think about yourself. And you think of how have you challenged yourself, or more importantly, how have you taken care of yourself, especially over the last 6 months? Whether you're an adult, whether you're a young person, are you taking stock at your mental health, or is it just a word that you hear and you're like, well, I don't take medication or I don't have a diagnosis, so my mental health doesn't affect me? But it did affect me, and it affected me in a big way, and it's going to touch on my life almost every hour for as long as I will live. So here's my story. Right there on the left, you see is me. I was super athletic. I almost could dunk. I'm just kidding. I wasn't any of those things, right? I couldn't run, I couldn't jump, but I got a free education. I went to Iowa State. I grew up in Los Angeles, California. I was brash, I was cocky. I kind of thought I knew it all. And then I met Coach Finley and I realized I didn't. And when I got to Iowa State, and now you guys are like, wait, but I thought your last name's Finley, and then how does that work? Well, I married my college coach's son. Thumbs up, if that makes sense? Okay, perfect. We'll talk about that part of the story later. But I got to Iowa State and I had this wonderful career. And I'm playing in front of 10,000 people and all these adoring fans. And constantly I started to realize over time my affirmations were coming from other people. And they would tell me, great game, Meadors, and 14, you're my hero. And hey, I want to get your jersey. And I was like, man, this kind of feels good. And so then I get on and I get drafted in the WNBA. And I'm like at the pinnacle of my career and I'm feeling really good. And then I end up getting cut, but that's okay. Because as I got cut, within that same day, I started a new job. And so now I'm 22 years old, and on the same day I get cut, I get a job, and I'm working, training players, and I'm traveling around the country. And from the outside looking in, people are like, man, Lindsey's got it all. She got to go to school for free. She got to play in the WNBA for all of 6 weeks, but don't tell my son because he still thinks it's cool that I got drafted to begin with. He doesn't know how long I actually only played for in the WNBA. And then I have this great job and I start training players, and now I'm up to Mr. Kerns said 40,000. Who's keeping count anymore, by the way, at that? Right, but 40,000 players I've trained, and I've put my face on DVDs, and then I built a business, Campus Cycle. I don't know anything about fitness programming, and I opened the first ever beat-driven spin studio in the state of Iowa. without knowing anything with my best friend. And so again, from the outside looking in, like, man, I had it all. And some of you guys are like, who is this pompous chick that the Thomas Family Foundation brought in? Right? And that's even what I'm thinking about when I tell this story. But I got to tell you how high I was, not just financially and not just physically and not just emotionally, but mentally. I thought I had it all. And then it all came crashing down. And at August 29th of 2012, I had a miscarriage. On August 30th of 2012, the next day, my husband, he had a heart procedure at Mayo Clinic. And so on August 29th, I lost a child. I thought I was good with it. I'm an athlete. I tough it out. Have you seen my LinkedIn profile? Have you seen how many Twitter followers I have? You know what, Billy? I told my husband, I said, you know what? I'm just going to, from I-35, you go straight up, and then you kind of go, what is this, east, right? And you get up to Rochester. I said, for those 2 hours and 15 minutes to get to Mayo Clinic, I'm going to literally bang my head on the dashboard, and I'm going to listen to the song Mercy by Dave Matthews Band. And I'm just going to get the miscarriage out of me, because I now got to focus on the next game and the next practice and the next and the next and the next. And I'm like, I'm good. I'll get through this. I got to be there for you now. And so I was there for him, and from the outside looking in, and my dad's an OBGYN. For those of you young people, talk to your parents about what kind of doctor that is. But he's an obstetrician gynecologist, and he was like, Lindsey, you should really talk to somebody about it. Talk? Dad, me? Like, Dad, you don't even know me. Well, he does, because he's my dad, right? But like, Dad, like, I'm good. I don't need to I talk to somebody about my feelings, about losing a child. Like, Dad, it hurt and it sucked, but we got to move on, man. We got the next thing. And so for the next 6 months, I made myself about as busy as I've ever done in my life. I volunteered like crazy. I trained players at 6 in the morning before school, 6 at night after school. I was working out at an insane level. I wasn't eating, I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't drinking. I was just go, go, go. And from the outside looking in, if you look back at my tweets during September of 2012 to January of 2013, people would be like, man, she had it all figured out. I had a quote for everything. I had a response to anything that somebody threw my way, and then it all came crashing down. And on January 29th, almost exactly 6 months to the day of having the miscarriage, I was hospitalized. And they put me in a behavioral health unit. And the first 10 days, I don't remember. No clue why I was there. I just knew I didn't sleep, I didn't eat, and I was kind of tired from going. And I got there, and after the 15 days when I got out of the hospital, people were like, man, Lindsey, where were you? And I was like, oh, you know those like celebrities, right? Because I'm from Los Angeles. You know those celebrities that like have to get hospitalized because they run themselves into the ground? Like that was just me. I had to change my schedule and work on some things. But that wasn't the real answer. The real answer was I had just been diagnosed with a mental illness. And I remember when the doctor told me the words of, hey, you have been, diagnosed with this mental illness. I remember looking at him like, no, doc, you have a mental illness for thinking that there's anything wrong with me. Because I'm Lyndsey Fennelly, and I have all these followers, and I do all these things, and I'm a doer, but I am awful at just being. But I didn't realize that at the time, and I certainly didn't want to accept it, because in 2013, the only time that mental illness ever got brought up, deranged gunman, violent shooter, a crazy individual, right? Someone who wanted to inflict self-harm, a suicidal mom, a depressed teenager, right? We attach these labels to human beings versus just realizing that we're all probably hurting in some way inside. And so I walked out of that doctor visit after the hospitalization. I looked at the doctor and I said, I'm done. I won't take medication. I'm not going to seek treatment. And I all but gave him the proverbial middle finger as I walked out. Like, do you guys understand proverbial? Like I didn't actually give him the middle finger, right? But I just kind of gave it to him in a different way. And so I walked out of that hospital, out of that doctor visit, and I basically tried to erase it. I tried to erase those 15 days because that's what I was good at. That's what athletes are good at. We suppress anything that doesn't feel good. We're on to the next win. So what's my next win? I got to have a kid. And we ended up having 2 beautiful children. And you'll see as the slides go on, it'll be very obvious which one doesn't listen to me, but I love them dearly anyway. But we had our son, William John, and then we had our daughter, Callie Ray. And for the 5-year time span for when I was hospitalized in 2013 for the next 5 years, again, I think I had it all. I have 2 beautiful kids and the hot husband still there and good jobs and campus cycles rolling and more workouts. And I started doing speaking engagements, and some Ed Thomas Family Foundation brought me in to motivate their kids a couple years ago. And again, people had no idea. But what I knew deep down inside was that something didn't feel right. And in the spring of 2018, things started to unravel again. And what I found with mental illness is the episodes that I've experienced are typically triggered by certain situations, certain things, and I went into that downward spiral again. But what I try to tell people is almost like the perfect storm. And the perfect storm lay dormant until the next strike can kind of hit. And so this first picture you'll see on the left is my family and I in Florida. So we were in the Atlantic Ocean, or I was in the Atlantic Ocean, and there's us, and we're having a great time. And then the next week, my best friend and business partner and I went to Malibu. So then I was in the Pacific Ocean. So my schedule was sure a little crazy, but who hasn't flown from coast to coast, tweeted about it, told the world, and thought they were really all that in a bag of chips, right? That's what I was kind of doing. And what I always like to show these pictures is people will say things like, well, I saw it coming, or I knew this was going to happen again. Really? Because I don't know about y'all, but I look pretty dang happy in those two pictures. Right? And so part of what mental illness, what makes it so hard is you don't see it. You can't feel it. You can't touch it. You can only hear it. And had the people around me really heard some of the things that I was saying, and as I started to tell that I was starting to get closer and closer to yet a second hospitalization in 5 years, they figured it out that I wasn't feeling very good about myself. And even though I was tweeting this, I felt like this. And even though I was a super happy and enjoyable and having a great time with my kid's mom, behind closed doors, I was really struggling. And just an hour after that picture on the right was taken, I lost my mind. And on the beaches of Malibu, my mind short-circuited. I don't remember anything that took place for a majority of the next 28 days. I was put in a straitjacket and then an ambulance, carted off to the UCLA Medical Center. Now I'm 2,500 miles from home. But the next day, my family and friends, my best friend, helped get me on a plane. We flew back to Iowa. For the next 3 to 4 days, they were trying to piece together what happened, why did I get here, what were the signs that we missed, and now what do we do? And my husband did one of the toughest things he's probably ever done in his life. He got me in the car, and he drove me to the Mary Greeley Medical Center for now the second time. And this time, they had no idea how long I was going to be up there, because they could tell for as manic as I was, as high as I was feeling, the depression was about to hit, and it was about to hit really hard. And so when I got into the Mary Greeley Medical Center, again, I don't remember the first 10 days. And they said it's like a cloak of darkness hovers over me, and I wouldn't talk to anyone, I wouldn't look anyone in the eye. And it wasn't just because that's how I felt, it was because, well, I was Lyndsey Fennelly. And I literally built almost this alter ego of like, I was untouchable, and I was Superwoman. I was out to save the community and volunteer and pick up everyone else's pieces, and yet my world was shattering right in front of me. But then on day 10, and this is where my psychiatrist gets a little bummed when I tell this part of the story, this is what lifted me, is a People magazine. It's a joke, people. You can laugh, all right? But what I found in reading this article was an individual who was successful, who was a mom, who was a wife. Actually, I didn't know her marital status at the time, but also a joke. Got it. And what I didn't realize at the time was that other people could actually be battling a mental illness and still be quote unquote successful and be happy. And there was a good ending to this story. And so as I scoured through this magazine, my husband threw it on the waiting table in front of me, and he said, hey, Lindsey, you know, when you get some free moments, which is kind of a funny joke in a behavioral health unit, because what do you have but nothing but time? He said, read this. But it wasn't super pushy. It wasn't like, hey, go read page 47, because if you push me, then I'm going to pull back and I won't react to it. So for somebody to know me that well, and he gets there and he tells me this, and so I start reading it, and I'm like, oh, well, she can sing these beautiful songs and have these beautiful kids, and her life is still full and complete, it seems like, and she's just drawing awareness to an illness that nobody talked about. And it's a lifelong disease. Just like people battle cancer and battle diabetes, people battle mental illness, but nobody talks about it unless it's a sad ending. And so that was day 10, and then here are the other two things that really lifted me. And this is gonna sound really cheesy and corny, but it's just simply the word love. My daughter, who was 6 months old at the time, Callie, had no idea where her mom was, had no idea that her mom was so embarrassed to be in scrubs, right? This is that picture that no other motivational speaker shows. This is me at one of my loneliest, worst, terrifying, scary hours, and I'm telling you that I have never felt my heart beat faster. and I didn't have eyeliner on, and I didn't have mascara, and I wasn't tweeting about it, but I just had to be reminded that young people, man, kids, we got to learn from you guys. Because if you get your phones away from us, you are hands down our best teachers. You are mostly free of expectation, and you're free of prejudgment. Maybe some of you guys, maybe I should be talking to like middle schoolers and elementary schools, right? But the point is that we all, if we just go back to where we were at our core when we were literally first born, we were put on this earth to love ourselves and to love others. And I was good at the loving others. There isn't a person hardly in Ames, Iowa that doesn't have my cell phone, that I couldn't get assign something for an auction, that I couldn't help give a free membership to Campus Cycle, that I couldn't train their player at any sort of crazy hour. But in all this, I realized that it wasn't until my kids looked at me that I was like, man, I don't love myself. I love them. I would do anything for them, but I wouldn't do anything for myself. And then on day 16, my son wrote this note, and I got to see him for the first time. And he said, Mom, you are pretty, you are beautiful, I miss you, I love you. This one's going to my grave with me, this note, right? And he was at the time, he's now 6. At the time, a 3-year-old lifted me out of the worst feelings that I've ever had about myself, reminding me that, Mom, I still need you. But more importantly, reminding me that I still need me too. And I think what's fascinating is everybody would look at me and be like, oh, man, Lindsey, she loves herself. She's got it all. She da-da-da. And I absolutely, and I've never told another group this, in this moment here when I received this note, I hated myself. I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. I was disappointed. There were so many things that I had never uncovered. Years of trauma, years of hurt, years of pain, years of sadness, things that we all just learned to, well, I got to make my pretty social media post. But man, did this person like it? Well, did this person like it? Oh God, they didn't like it. Well, now I don't feel, right? And we live in this world, and this is why the homework is watching The Social Dilemma. We live in this world where our phones are like a pacifier for our emotions, right? And it dictates how we feel about ourselves. It's actually kind of scary. And so I got out of the hospital, and then I started focusing on these 3 A's. And it wasn't right away, because sometimes I show this slide right after I talk about Will's note. It took a while. It took me 2 to 3 months to even talk to anyone about this. It took me a few months to realize that this was going to be my new normal, and I would have to accept it, and I would have to be more aware of my mental health, but I would also want to be an advocate for it, because there weren't a lot of people talking about it. There weren't a lot of people standing on a stage and saying, hey, I'm battling this, because typically that was only with the other lifelong, kind of more popular illnesses. So I've answered every call under the sun, whether it's been news reporters and magazines and articles and things, just telling people it is okay to not be okay. We don't have to be perfect in every single moment. We don't have to be the Twitter profile 24/7. It's actually really unhealthy and really damaging, and it's just fake. It's not real. We've turned ourselves into like little cell phone monsters, essentially, where we do and say whatever that device tells us to so that we feel good as a result. We should feel good because we have life, because we have air to breathe, because we have relationships. We are meant to live in relationships, not with a device, but with human beings. And so just recently, I've started to think so much about how did I go wrong, and this has really helped me, is just simply being aware of my mental health. I didn't even know that existed. I just thought you were supposed to chase and grind and hustle, and those words make me literally want to vomit. Good thing no one's sitting too close in the front row, right? And all that stuff is important. And it is key to work hard, and it is key to give back to your community, and it is key to do all the things that you guys I know are learning here as part of this wonderful family foundation. And I intentionally can't talk about the family or I'll be a blubbering mess, but I don't think there's a more special family and foundation in the entire state of Iowa, if not the country. And all the things that you're learning as part of these leadership academies are so important. But you can't lead others well until you lead yourself best. And what I finally learned how to do, and it's literally been over the last few days, is finally just lead myself in a way that's more authentic and more transparent and not just dictated by the next. So finding that balance has been really important. And the last couple slides here, and then I'll finish up, is just understanding the difference between mental illness and mental health, because we talk about them kind of in this coexisting world, but they're actually two very different things, right? So mental illness, I'm going to start on the right side, It's a diagnosis that leads to a treatment plan. Somebody has schizophrenia, they have bipolar, they have ADHD, they have depression, and then treatment plan, right? So there's verbal therapy. I personally go to a therapist every other week. I do not know how I survived without a therapist. And I'm talking about personal relationships, I'm talking about challenging family dynamics, I'm talking about continuing to find a healthier professional balance, right? All these things really great in having a therapist. And just a chance for me to just be me. All right, and I think so much, again, we all wear the labels and the hats and we're trying to do all these things that it's easy to get lost in the shuffle. It typically carries a negative stigma. It's discussed very privately. It affects 1 in 5 people. So chances are, even if you aren't personally diagnosed with something, you will know someone who is, a close family or friend. Mental illness is 1 in 5, and it's also typically medication-based. I take 3.5 pills every day, and I tell people that if the worst part of my day is having to take 3.5 pills to ensure that my brain doesn't move at a speed that's uncomfortable, to ensure that I get the proper amount of sleep every day, then I've got a pretty good life. And then you look at the other side, is there's a continuum for improvement on mental health, right? If we say that somebody is a size 10 in a pair of jeans and they want to move to a size 8, it's the same thing with mental health. Right? You're maybe here, you're feeling this way, and this is how you engage with others, and this is how you control your emotions when you deal with tough situations, and this is how you handle trauma, grief, pain, loss, but now you want it to improve to here. You don't have to be diagnosed with anything to want to improve your mental health. Right? We all have the ability to simply make this something that becomes a bigger priority. How do we handle uncomfortable people, places, things in a better light despite maybe that discomfort? And then here's the last kind of heavy slide, and if you want to take notes or you want to picture, what do they call that? Take a picture. Good, Lindsey. With this slide, you're more than welcome to as well. And these are just some healthy habits, some self-care tips, some things that I've personally learned over the years as I think of my walk and my journey with mental health. The number one is self-care. So simple things like taking a shower every day. And this is going to be way too personal, and I know that this is going to be filmed, and Mr. Kerns just told me it's going to go out into the www, the World Wide Web. But I will tell you that when I am most manic, when I am feeling mentally unhealthy the most, my showers last about 30 seconds, and I have a cell phone in one hand the entire time. And so that's one of my triggers. Okay, Lindsey, take a big deep breath. You have enough time to take a 10-minute shower. The kids are both old enough where they can survive. Every cell phone doesn't have to be picked up right away. Every email doesn't have to be responded to. You don't have a meeting today, so you don't need to scramble, right? And so just simply self-care, taking a shower every day and making sure that you give yourself that time. Working out every day, right? Studies show, and I'm not going to be the person to tell you the studies because I'm not that smart, but the importance of working out every day and what that does to release the endorphins, even if it's just a walk as you start things out over the next couple months. The next one, adequate sleep. Raise your hand if you know who Puff Daddy is, or P. Diddy. Anyone? Okay, you heard of him. So he was one of my favorite rappers growing up, and I don't remember exactly what song, but he had some kind of lyric that was like, if you want to be successful, notice I can't actually sing like him, but like, if you want to be successful, you can't be sleeping all night, you got to work more than 9 to 5 or something like that. So I'm like, oh, well, P. Diddy, I watched his house in Cribs, and he had like a bomb house, and he had like insane cars. And so in the back of my mind for the last 15 years was, well, I got to return emails at 2 o'clock in the morning if I want to have the same kind of life, right? And we've attached this word success to being mentally unhealthy, and people don't look at it that way, but I think it's really, really true. I spoke to a group of I don't know if influential is the right word, individuals last Thursday, and one of the things that they talk so much about is we don't know how to shut it off anymore. When are we working? When do we need to give back? When do we go? And we rarely just give ourselves the time for a break. So making sure you're getting the 7 to 8 hours of sleep. Identifying triggers. Again, these for me are uncomfortable people, places, things that make our heart rate jump. And you guys have an Apple Watch? Apple Watch, okay, a couple people. So one of the things that Apple Watch function, and I know other watches have this too, I do not work for Apple, just throwing that out there. But what it'll do is your heart rate is attached to your brain speed. And again, I cannot explain the physiological science behind it, but I will tell you that when I am around certain people, my Apple Watch goes off. And what the Apple Watch function does is it reminds you to breathe. Wait, what? Like, we have this device that reminds you to do the first human function that you ever performed as an infant, which is you come into the world and you breathe. An Apple Watch reminds us that. Because when we start to feel stressed, when we start to feel anxious, when we get around people, places, things that make us feel uncomfortable because we've never dealt with them, then the breathe notification goes off. So a couple of years ago, I looked over at my husband. I'm like, just trying to gauge, like, low key, right? I'm like, hey, Billy, how often does your Apple Watch go off? You know, the breathe function. And he's like, oh, like twice. And I'm like, oh, twice a day, good. And he's like, no, like twice a week, maybe. And Billy, quite my opposite, very laid back, very, still hardworking, still has wonderful qualities, but doesn't feel the need to be there all the time on for everybody, for everything. And so he's like, yeah, how about you? And I was like, oh yeah, like twice. Like, you're twice a week, I'm twice too, like kind of playing off. He's like, no, like how many, like what do you mean by twice? I'm like, oh, like twice, you know, and kind of dancing around. And he's like, twice a day? And I go, like twice an hour? And he's like, well, that's ridiculous. But again, that's how my brain speed works. That's how I physiologically was built. And so I need medication to slow that down and ensure that I have a more chemically balanced mindset. But I think it's a really fascinating thing to understand what your triggers are. Maybe for some of you it's Monday morning. Maybe for some of you it's a certain class because it reminds you of something that you went back to as a young person that you never really truly talked about. I encourage you to welcome sort of what makes you uncomfortable and then try to talk through them. The last couple, maintaining healthy boundaries with people and cell phone. The biggest encouragement I just have is we have to give our brains a break from the constant stimulation, right? Put your phone in airplane mode for a couple hours. Your phone shouldn't be out when you're doing homework. If you're Snapchatting right now, well, that just hurts my feelings, but that's okay. I have a therapist now to work through that. Thank you for laughing at that joke, finally. But I think, you know, we think we have to be on and we think we have to give and give and give. And, well, what if we miss out on this? It's like my therapist said 2 years ago when I first started with her. She said she thinks FOMO, fear of missing out, will be a legit anxiety disorder to give to young people, because if you don't Snapchat every day, well, you're not part of the cool kids. No, don't build a Snap story, build a life story. A life full of meaning, a life full of purpose, a life full of intention, a life full of love, a life full of forgiveness, a life full of all the character things that your moms and dads and great educators here are teaching you. That's what's important. Not showing out on social media every day in a way that you think makes you cool. And then paying strong attention to the feelings and eliminating the use of alcohol or drugs to mask hurt, pain, or sadness. If you would sit in one of my therapy sessions, you would be floored. We went all the way back to literally to the day I was born to find out that there were things that triggered me from the time I was literally 1 day old until now being 35-year-old mom who's been quote unquote successful. And what I think a lot of us have done, and people who live in the limelight or the spotlight, or people who have been in the athlete world, or people who have had good education, and you want to get the A, and you want to push on to the next thing, we realize that there's hard things that take place, like allowing time for grief. And if you get a C this year, it is okay to be sad about it. It doesn't mean within the next minute you now need to grab out your notebook and start studying for the next test and then go climb the ladder to get the A. It means you should probably look yourself in the mirror and be like, well, why did I get a C? Well, how do I improve that? Well, how do I make myself not have that happen again? But it's okay to just allow time. And that's part of what created my downward spiral, is that miscarriage, right? And I thought that I could go from being, you know, accomplish everything, do everything, to then feeling like I was a failure and trying to erase that feeling without really giving it time or exposure. And then the last couple thoughts are just seek professional counsel for therapy, for medication or diagnosis. If you don't feel good, talk to somebody about it. Best people for young people to go to are adults. Talk with your coach, talk with your parents, talk with your teachers. If you have a school counselor, talk with your school counselor. There is nothing wrong with talking to an adult about not feeling good about how you feel. And that is one of the biggest reasons why I jump on stages and I tell everybody all my challenges in the mental illness world, is simply to let people know it's okay. My therapist and I, we walk around Ames. It's 3.2 miles from her office and then back to her office. And we do it outside because I feel more comfortable that way. And that means that the entire city of Ames can watch Lindsey walk around Ames with her therapist every other, I don't remember the exact day and time because I'm trying to get away from my calendar. Yeah. Every other week. All right. And it's okay. There's nothing wrong with admitting that you need help. Right, and utilizing available resources. Most high schools have at least a counselor. Mental health is becoming something that is talked about more and more and more as we continue to explore it and continue to understand it, and we get people simply to just talk about it. And so here's the last thing I like to share is I am writing a book right now. As of right now, the title is called Life to the Full. It's my favorite Bible verse, which is John 10:10, and he talks about living life to the full despite kind of everything else that you have. And that's my biggest encouragement to everyone sitting in here is if you do get diagnosed or if you are challenged right now, maybe the coronavirus situation and pandemic makes you uneasy, you still have life. Today's September 21st, 2020. You don't get this day back. So it doesn't matter if you are battling challenging academics. It doesn't matter if you're battling a tough boss. It doesn't matter if you're maybe sitting here like, man, maybe I should talk to somebody. Like, that's okay too. But recognize that you only get one life, and so I encourage you as much as you can, live life to the full. And why I always end with this picture is I want people to see a different vision of mental illness. I am sick. I am really, really sick. But I'm also really, really happy. And the two can coexist in the same world if you just look yourself in the mirror and say, you know what? I accept those imperfections. I'm going to love myself no matter what, because my kids reminded me that that's the most important thing we can do for everybody else is most importantly love ourselves. But it's not to love myself to chase how many Instagram followers I can get or how many likes I can get on Facebook, but like a real deep love that's like, hey, I don't like you. I love you. And my daughter, who's 2 years old right now, has been saying this lately. And she stomps into my room, she'll cross her arms, and she'll go, Mom, I don't like you. I love you. And I think that's a really powerful thing, because by far the best medication and the best treatment I've ever had has been them. Because they were able to continue to support and love and look at me and say, hey, you know what? I know you're not perfect. And even though you're a quote-unquote motivational speaker and you jump on stages, you can still have your flaws, but you can still give back to the world in ways that are meaningful and powerful. So I'll end with my last quote. You guys guess which one doesn't listen to me? Was that obvious in the picture? Maybe not as much in this one. But I'll end with this last quote, and then I'll flip to the next slide if anyone has, they want to reach out. Certainly I try to make myself as available as possible, is simply this. You don't have a right to the cards that you get to play. None of us do, right? You don't have a right to the cards that come your way on that table. But you do have an obligation to play the heck out of the hand that you've been dealt. So go do that. Tap into adults as much as you can at this stage in your life to learn, to improve, to get better. And if there's anything I can do to support you, to help you, please certainly don't hesitate to reach out. So thank you guys for having me. All the best, and a big, big, big appreciation again to the Ed Thomas Family Foundation, who they don't make them any better. Thank you.